We go into systemic. We improve our liver's capacity to use more fat as a fuel source. We improve the mitochondrial efficiency, possibly even mitochondrial count within the liver, so we can recover faster between sets now. What's up, everyone? So on today's video, I wanted to talk about training stimuli. What is training stimuli? And the three main types of training stimuli. So, and a little bit about the importance of periodization, which we'll flip over to. But so what is training stimuli? This refers to a specific condition created by the type of training that facilitates a more specific response from the body. So most people, the general population, when they go into the gym and they perform a specific workout exercise based off of like the sets, the type of exercise, like whether it's a lat pull down versus a lat row, rest periods, all that kind of stuff will play a big role. Tempo, for those that are not familiar with tempo, that would be like, 3 seconds down, 1 second up kind of thing. So 3010, just the number that denotes how long you should be going through that movement. All this stuff can facilitate a different response from the body. And this is kind of like an unknown subject to most. It's kind of like, becoming more popular and understood, but still not quite there. Mainly because, which will make more sense in a bit, but you'll hear me say this probably in every freaking video I make, the bodybuilding industry, okay? And I'll explain why the bodybuilding industry makes this kind of seem not important when it is very important, especially for natural individuals. So we'll start with hypertrophy. Most people know that as to build up of the muscle. There are other forms of hypertrophy like myonuclei hypertrophy, mitochondria hypertrophy, but we'll stick with the basic context of building muscle. So I'll explain a little, like very quick tidbits of how to specifically achieve this. So most people know hypertrophy with volume, so more sets, reps, higher or like longer tempo, stuff like that. But also this is an inflammatory response because that inflammation is what's going to signal the body to build that muscle tissue. And how that is achieved is things like lengthened position exercises. So like a pull down, like a barbell squat, but obviously accompanying shortened position workouts with that as well. So if you did a barbell squat and then a leg extension, that can stimulate hypertrophy as well. Or vice versa, like leg extension first and then a barbell squat. And this is what most people train, just because they actually don't understand these other stimuli. So most people will train in this hypertrophy realm. And what happens when you continuously train and people plateau, never mind the functional reasons of liver, gut health and so on and so forth. But in terms of training stimulus, you can only call for an action so many times for so long before the body stops responding. It adapts, right? You're forever adapting, and it will adapt to this because for you to build more muscle tissue it's not ideal for survival. It just means more calories that need to be expended. But surviving trauma is ideal for survival. So this is one of the ways that why you need to train really, really hard in order to stimulate this hypertrophy growth, which there is new research coming out showing that you actually probably don't have to train as hard as most people think. I'm not saying don't train hard, but that's a whole different topic. But so this here is what most people are doing on a daily basis when they go to the gym, right? Whether they realize it or not. So they'll say you need to switch up your workouts or your exercises. So one day you do barbell squat and then the next day you do leg press. And you think, I'm switching it up, right? Reality is you are probably still hitting that stimulus. If you're still doing the same kind of rep ranges, the same rest periods, the same tempos, you're still falling under this hypertrophy thing. And so this is why changing up your exercises isn't always the most optimal tool for bringing results. Once again, I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying that it's not going to be that's the magic pill kind of thing. Then metabolic is another one that people unknowingly perform quite a bit. And how we define metabolic is that's going to be more more cellular driven in terms of like molecules and stuff that affect the cells rather than the muscle tissue. Like this obviously affects cells, but it's a little different here. So we're going to break this down into local and systemic. And so essentially what that means, if you are doing local metabolic, you're going for that specific muscle. So if I'm doing bicep curls with a metabolic stimuli, I'm going to be targeting the bicep. If I adjust the workout program and do more of like giant sets, so, a leg extension with an upper back row with a dumbbell lateral raise, I am systemically creating more of a metabolic response. And this here, local metabolic work is going to be more for conditioning of the muscle. So you're going to make that specific muscle better at using fat as a fuel source. It's also going to increase things like glycogen uptake. And when you look at systemic is going to be more globally liver taxing. This is one of my favorite training phases when it comes to health. Because the better your liver is, the better you are. Now, it's important to remember that you need to be trainable in these stimuli, meaning if you're super inflamed, hypertrophy isn't going to work very well because you have to exceed this threshold to create a response, but your inflammation is way up here. So you have to do so much work that you just cannot recover from, which I'll go over on the other side here afterwards. And then local, like if you're super inflamed and you're struggling to get nutrients into the cell, then you're going to really struggle to provide the necessary substrate for you to perform that exercise where you can actually recover from that and not create more inflammation. So for example, if you don't have enough carbohydrates for whatever reason, whether you're not eating enough or that inflammation is preventing from it really getting into the cell, you're going to send off more negative electrons. And this is going to create more oxidative stress, more free radicals, and it's going to create more inflammation. It's going to work against you. So you have to be trainable in these stimuluses. Systemic, for example, if your liver is like really taxed and really poor due to like poor diet or whatever, you're not going to be able to deal with the acid that is being produced, right? And so a little nerd fact here. If you've ever gotten sick during your workout, like you've thrown up, that's your liver. Because this is why most people get sick on leg day, biggest muscles. It produces so much acid that the liver cannot flush it. So what happens is it sends that acid down the bile duct into your stomach. How do we get rid of that? Right? So that's where you get sick. So if you're getting sick during your workouts, you're going to want to improve your liver. My liver was so compromised years ago, I would do like 3 sets of squats and throw up. It was pathetic. So I got chicken legs. But anyways, so that's metabolic, essentially. Think of this as more conditioning is what you want to think of this, especially systemic is definitely more conditioning. Neurological, this is your strength. This is your powerlifting stuff, right? How you're going to achieve this is, as you see, most powerlifters are doing multi-joint movements. So barbell squats, deadlifts, bench press, stuff like that. Because the more muscles and joints that are involved, the more it taxes this. And then it has to adapt to this. That's why you hear things like farmer strength, because they're always throwing things around and doing stuff, right? So more joints are involved. So you become stronger. Now, it's important to understand. So for example, as I was explaining thresholds, also genomes, right? So if you're constantly calling upon mTOR, which stimulates protein synthesis, it's going to eventually wreak havoc on the body. So this is why you don't want to be training like this all the time. You're going to really adapt to this rather quickly, like 3-4 weeks tops when you're doing metabolic. And it's just the diminishing returns. There's a point of no return. So this is why you want to periodize. But neurological, the central nervous system is forever adapting. So this is something that you'll see that guys can, men and women, they can perform this forever and continuously see progression, continuously get stronger and stronger and stronger due to the central nervous system consistently adapting, not really, maladapting like it would with hypertrophy and metabolic stimulus. So that's a little bit of tidbit there. And I'll say too with neurological, that's like your lower rep ranges. So like anywhere from like 1 to 6 kind of deal, 1 to 3. Now, that will be in context of the individual. So if you have consistently been performing 15 to 20 reps for an extended period of time, right? Internet's going to say hypertrophy is 8 to 12 rep range. But if you've been doing 15 to 30 reps, your hypertrophy could be 10 to 15 reps. Your metabolic could be like would be less too. But neurological could be your 10 to 12 reps because you've been so accustomed and adapted to performing 15 to 30 reps. So it's all within context of the individual. But basically, the internet will say 8 to 12 reps, rep range, 4 to 6 sets kind of thing. Metabolic, this is kind of really unknown. I've explained this in previous videos. This is that incomplete rest method. So short rest periods, 20, 30-second rest periods. Think of it as you're redlining your vehicle. You got to keep it in that red zone to create this stimuli. It's that pump. This is why people will tend to perform this quite a bit because they love that pump. That feeling is awesome, right? So this is why people tend to perform that one quite a bit. But once again, you have a threshold on these. So how we kind of counteract the negative effects of performing these stimuli for too long, unless it's neurological, is proper periodization. So you read periodization and they'll explain like to do X, Y, Z, but there's not really a scientific backing as to why. Not that they don't know, they just kind of don't provide it. So I'm going to provide a little information here as to why we do this. So when we're talking about the importance of periodization, I'll do like a scenario here, okay? So let's say, I'll also talk like adaptations, okay? So let's say you're coming in the gym, you're new to the gym, and you're relatively healthy, okay? Here is our bar of recovery. This is how much room we have for recovery. Now, you need to exceed a threshold to achieve that stimuli so you can create those adaptations. So for example, if your threshold's here and you come in here and you barely do anything and you don't exceed that threshold, you're not going to get a lot of hypertrophy results, okay? But now it's important to understand that this is why periodization is so important. The more you do hypertrophy, the higher your threshold is going to be. And this is why one of the reasons why people don't get specific results. So noobs, beginners in the gym though, because they've never trained, they're going to have a really low threshold. So they don't need to jump into your Phil Heath and Ronnie Coleman and style workouts. They could do very minimal stuff and exceed that threshold. And now look how much room they have for adaptations. They have all this room. Because we have to remember, we got to add stress too. So relationship stress, work stress, digestive stress, poor sleep, whatever it may be, onto this. So technically, we're sitting about here, but we still have this much room for recovery. So what happens though is you come into the gym, you're a beginner, and you get these instant results. So you're like, oh, sweet. Obviously, this program I am doing is correct because it's gotten me great results. You'll hear this all the time. Oh, it worked for me before. It worked for me before. You are forever adapting. It's so important to understand that. I cannot stress that enough. So what happens is they tell you, oh, your muscles aren't growing, so you need to do more volume. So your threshold's way up here. So you do a buttload of volume. You do 6 days a week, blah, 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 blah. You know I'm going with this. So you exceed that threshold, but you created so much stress from the workout. Your life is in shambles. Your bar recovery is here. So now we're adding this on top of the stress. You have no room for adaptations. Okay? This is where steroids come in. This is where performance-enhancing drugs come in because what they do is they go like this. Boop, boom. Now you have room for adaptations because you're constantly partitioning nutrients to the muscle, stimulating mTOR, whatever the drug may be. So this is where performance-enhancing drugs come in. This is why they get you the results. Okay, now at the sacrifice of your physiology. So if we want to do this, and this applies, what I'm about to go through will apply for people that are enhanced as well, performance enhancing drugs. Okay, because trust me, it works. So let's start over here. All right, we got relatively healthy. We got our bar of recovery. Okay, we're new to the gym. We start training, okay? Here's our threshold. We exceed that threshold, but as we continue to train, this threshold continues to come up. So our threshold's here now. Let's say this is week 6, okay? So you have to do a bunch of volume, but now you got your stress. We're getting relatively close to running out of room because we don't have enough recovery for adaptations. So what do we do to prevent this issue of not getting the results that we're looking for and possibly creating more health complications. We switch, we periodize, we go into metabolic. So now our threshold for metabolic's here. So one metabolic workout is probably going to get you some results, right? As we are doing metabolic, this threshold for hypertrophy is going to come down. Backwards, whatever, you know what I'm saying, okay? So instead of being up here, it's now going to be down here, your threshold, okay? And then so as we reach, we'll say week 3 of metabolic, running out of room, we switch to neurological. We start performing neurological, minimal threshold to gain strength, okay? This is also a very good phase. If you are unhealthy, this is one of your best phases. It's the least inflammatory, it's the lowest volume. It's one of your best phases when it comes to trying to fix functional health issues or whatever it may be, okay? Or if you just need, this is where like deload comes in. Deload doesn't necessarily mean less reps, less sets, work less. Just you can change stimulus. So while we are performing neurological, we are deloading from metabolic and hypertrophy. So we spend 4 weeks in neurological. Hypertrophy, it'll never be where you were as a newbie, but it's going to be lower. Same with, as you're doing this, metabolic is coming down as well because you haven't touched it for a bit. So you're recovering from that and you're not calling upon those same genes and those same cells, lowering this threshold. So now you go neurological 4 weeks, you come back, you need less volume, less work to create this hypertrophy stimuli, to get the adaptations for hypertrophy. You go back 4-6 weeks, metabolic's nice and low, you come back, okay? That's what periodization is. That's what deloading is. You don't need to do, so let's say your workout program is barbell squat with a dumbbell lateral raise, with an upper back row, like all straight sets, not supersetting, with, I don't know, a glute bridge, for example, okay? You perform 8 to 12 reps, whatever. You can come back and do that again, and you'll probably you could get close to the same results, okay? Now, as time, as mentioned, you can't, like, it's not like that threshold is gonna come back to when you first ever stepped in the gym. So every time you do come back, you do need probably to do at least the same or a little bit more, but you're gonna easily achieve those adaptations, okay? Another reason why we change stimuli is because I mentioned it in that video where I got prepared for my photo shoot. Oh, dang. Is while you are, so hypertrophy is going to be like, you're going to want lots of like, food and glycogen and all that kind of stuff. So what we do is, let's start with neurological. We promote more strength. We become stronger using a neurological stimuli so we can lift more weight in hypertrophy and create more of a stimuli by doing so. So let's say you're weak, okay? You're gonna make like that much stimuli. Let's say you're strong, you can create that much stimuli, okay? So we perform neurological, we become stronger. But we don't go into hypertrophy quite yet because neurological hasn't really been taxing our cardiovascular system. It hasn't really been taxing our liver. Because remember, we want to create this stress. We want to tax these systems in order to get these adaptations, right? Stress is how you adapt. Problem is we're under a lot of chronic stress, maladaptation, but let's say in a perfect world here. So you're going to switch to metabolic. You got this newfound strength. You're going to switch to metabolic, okay? And like, you're not going to lose strength unless you like entirely stop working out, some sort of inflammatory condition, starvation, whatever. Normally though, you're still going to keep that strength and not training neurologically, as long as you're still exercising. So we come into metabolic, we go into systemic. We improve our liver's capacity to use more fat as a fuel source. We improve the mitochondrial efficiency, possibly even mitochondrial count within the liver. So we can recover faster between sets now. Between sets and between workouts. We sleep better, we manage our stress better, we use less stress hormones to respond to our daily situations by performing a systemic metabolic phase. And then we go into the local metabolic phase, so the shorter rest periods, to stimulate that nutrient uptake, that local conditioning of the specific muscle, and more glycogen within that muscle. So we perform that. Now we come over to our hypertrophy phase. We have newfound strength. We have an improved liver for recovery, and we have improved local conditioning and glycogen retention in specific muscles. We're going to get some pretty wicked output in hypertrophy now. We're going to be able to work harder, longer, and recover better to build the most muscle, because ultimately the goal is to build muscle. Okay. Like, I know some people don't want to be right and bulky, and like, you'll hear a lot of females say they don't want to be bulky and stuff, but the more muscle you have, the more food you can eat, the healthier you will be. We are not, the Dr. Gabrielle Union, I really like what she says, we're not really obese, we are under muscled. It's kind of hard pressed to find a very obese individual that has a lot of muscle mass, because muscle will utilize more calories, more expenditure with every rep, all that kind of stuff, more hormone production, less inflammation, less insulin, right? So we want muscle. So we want to periodize accordingly. We want to potentiate ourselves so we can get a wicked hypertrophy phase. And we can recover properly. We can build some good muscle in a timely manner without burning ourselves into the ground, without creating a lot of inflammation, a lot of health issues. We can look great, we can feel great, and we can eat a lot of food. So this is what I always tell my clients. Anybody that has a consultation with me, I say, my goal is to get you to your specific body composition, your specific weight, and not having to eat salads to maintain that. No Jenny Craig stuff, none of that. No Weight Watchers. I want you to be able to eat cheeseburger and pizza on the weekend and maintain that body composition. Now, of course, the gut health, all that stuff's gonna come into it. But once that's taken care of, we can really perform these training stimuli, and we can really put on some good muscle. We can get a good pump for a photo shoot for a beach day, right? We can get nice and strong to lift our significant other over our heads, whatever kind of goal you're trying to achieve, okay? This is where periodization comes in. This is how I periodize for my clients. This is what I periodize for myself, right? And it's important though to remember that stress plays a role. So when you're like calculating volume within your workout, right? Remember, if you're super stressed out and your job is killing you and all this kind of stuff, you got to remember that goes into your programming. That's super important to understand. If you got a cushy life and you're not really stressed, you can do a lot more volume. But if you're really stressed out, you cannot, right? And so this is why periodization is so important. And this is why, I'll say again, if you have health complications, right? You're not sleeping properly, you are got bloated and distended guts all the time, you have diarrhea, whichever it may be, you got sore joints, all that kind of stuff. Do not perform these yet. Okay. Use this training stimuli, powerlifting style. Okay. Anywhere from 1 to 6 reps, nice long rest periods, anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes, depending on what you're doing. Okay. I understand that's very broad, but there's a lot of context involved that I won't get into. But this is going to be the least stressful for your cells, for your liver, all that kind of stuff. Yes, you got to watch your central nervous system, because if it's over agitated, this could add to that volume. But most people are struggling with cellular issues, which are affecting the central nervous system. So keep this training if you're dealing with health issues. Okay. This is one of the best ones. And then prepare yourself for these ones. So as mentioned, you get some awesome gains, you can feel great, look great, and eat more food. So there's a little bit of insight on how I do things, the science behind it. If you want to know more, as mentioned, always hop in the DMs, drop a comment below. I hope you all enjoyed that.